skateboarding was definitely like a savior, given the circumstances of me growing up.
Felt good.
I'm from Musqueam, Alberta, Samson Cree Nation. I was raised traditionally, like through ceremony and speaking my language. But when I was 11 years old, I was taken off reserve and forced into residential school. It was a bad place to be, man. It definitely fucked me up. As soon as I was of age, I pulled myself out of there. And that's when things started happening.
Yeah, Amar and Joe here.
Joe Buffalo, as I live and breathe. It's such an honor to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Jeff in Las Vegas, thank you for joining me today to talk about your amazing story.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, Joe, what an inspirational story. Tell us about how skateboarding as an outlet helped change your life.
Well, growing up in the prairies, we didn't have many options, you know what I mean? And there was like either you played in organized sports and you had the money to play and keep up and all that stuff, or you just took on something that was just what all the other kids did. It was usually the troubled kids who would, resonate towards like skateboarding back in the 80s. So I was just like, I'm gonna run with the troubled kids, just because this is what we did. And so I mean, I couldn't even afford a skateboard yet. I was calling myself a skateboarder, it's just I wanted to be attached to this this raw culture. Back then it was just so badass, so.
Yeah, you were back in the day when skateboarding was just in its infancy and just being radical and still developing.
It was so new to us. Like, I didn't even know, like, again, it was so new to us, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, there were times where I put it down and there were distractions and, but I picked it back up again. And so I'm very grateful.
And Mark,
Kind of like a boomerang, when you throw
Oh, yeah.
a boomerang. Yeah, that's how I treated my skateboard. So a lot of people, it doesn't come back to them, you know what I mean? They throw it and it's gone and that's it. So I'm super fortunate.
And Amar, how did Joe's story come to your attention?
Well, Joe and I met through skateboarding back in 2005, actually, in Montreal. So I was kind of like a young 18-year-old filmer kid, and we kind of skated together over the course of the summer. And then I left, moved out west here to Vancouver, went to film school, pursued film, and we lost touch. And then it wasn't until 2019, summer 2019, Joe turned pro. And I heard about that and saw an article about him come out. And that's when he spoke about being a residential school survivor, like in a very public way. And that's when I discovered it and was just kind of blown away by his story. And, obviously recognized him that, we had that connection from I guess that would have been 14 years earlier. So then I realized he was living in Vancouver as well. And so reached out to him and yeah, it kind of went from there.
And Joe, you were the last of your generation to be sent to these residential schools. Those just tore Native communities apart, didn't they?
Yeah, that was the government's plan, was to eradicate the Native population, and so that was just one of the many genocides that were thrown at my people, on top of here's, oh, you're cold, here's some smallpox blankets, or and the whiskey trade, and there's all these genocides that they've been trying to wipe my people out since we've been around, since they've invaded us. So it's, you know what I mean? Residential school is just another genocide that the government failed at, and so, yeah, it's
yeah, because you said that your grandfather
exposed, so.
Yeah, because you said your grandfather and your parents before you, but you had it better than they did, if you could even say that. And it really haunted
me. Because they taught me the language in there. Whereas my mom, if you got caught speaking the language, yeah, they'd hide you. You know what I mean? They would definitely get a licking for practicing your culture or just speaking your language. And so that's what I meant when I didn't get it that bad. They taught us Cree, you know what I mean? Like, we were able to practice culture. And so, yeah. Big
Yeah,
difference.
because you had that line, you heard the spirits in the walls for the dark history. That was chilling.
That's real life.
Absolutely. And Amar, tell me about gaining the trust to tell Joe's story, because I have some dear friends that are native and they're notoriously private, especially to outsiders. And every time I try to ask about things or visit somewhere, they're just very private people. So tell me about gaining the trust of Joe and also the native community.
Well, I mean, I think that's maybe more of a question for Joe of like why like he kind of, you know, trusted me. I think it was just really putting our friendship first. I think really, I think that's what mattered the most, I think, to both of us. And
I was so tender into my sobriety, you know what I mean? After rock bottoming and having nowhere to go and having the support system in place that I did have allowed for me to like shed layers of survival off, you know, where I was normally like on, you know, alert, high alert, always. This allowed for me to just build trust in myself, you know, and the more that I was able to understand and discover who the spirit was inside of me, who I was actually, then the more I was self-trust was doing its thing. So the more I was giving, it was coming back. And so when we already had established a friendship in 05, again, I didn't even remember those years because it was just such a blur that it took having to refresh until finally I was like, all right, I got 1 foot in, you know, and it's like, that's the whole trust thing, you know, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So that allowed for it to do its thing until eventually it was like we had rekindled that 05 friendship, and it was like it happened so organically. And then taking on the director of photography, Liam Mitchell, who I'd already done a couple of projects with already, and we have known each other for a long time, so it didn't feel forced, you know. It didn't feel like we were out breaking the ground we were doing. It was just mainly, it just felt natural, you know, with the bros kind of thing.
And you know, Joe, I'm not sure your story is inspirational, and I'm not sure what you're prepared for people who see this, because it touched me incredibly at a personal level, because I have a dear friend and roommate who's Navajo, and he's from the Navajo Nation, and he is addicted to heroin, addicted to alcohol. He's 25 years old. He's a skateboarder. He's died 3 times in front of me, once in my car and twice in his room. And I've known him for now 6 years. I had to break it off with him finally after 2 months. It's just I could not, you know, deal with it anymore. And I went through a lot, trust me. And I just don't know how to get to him. I don't know how to reach him, because watching your story, it's exactly like him, you know, and he's the greatest.
I had to like dig into my culture. Sorry, I had to like fall back in the old way, how my people have been living since the beginning. You know what I mean? That's how far back I had to go. Luckily, my ancestors are still there. They're right here behind me, and they go with me everywhere I go. So it was establishing that contact and that connection with the creator, which allowed for the extra healing, because there was proverbial band-aids that were all over me that I was covered in, band-aids on top of band-aids. And it was, oh, back in the day this happened, and why am I hanging on to these things? Why am I, you know? And so as I was slowly getting to know myself and my spirit, they were just falling off of me, until eventually you gather the strength in your chest and you're like, this is, and then it just comes. It doesn't even feel like, you know how like some things can look prompted or seem prompted.
Right. I told him to embrace his native side. Yeah, he goes to the res once a year in Arizona, or excuse me.
Everyone's got their own methods of healing,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so all you
Right.
can do is just pray for him, you know?
Well,
Smudge for the man.
that's where we've been for the last 3 years.
He's got to recognize his patterns, and you know what I mean?
But I mean, are you ready for people to reach out to you, just like I have today, to tell you their story? Because there's so many people that have your
I
story.
mean, I'll to an extent, I've got to protect myself, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not no walking hero. This is not on some unsung. I didn't just go to war and come back and multiple times just to have it exposed, and here's my story, and here's, you know what I mean? I'm still constantly seeking therapy myself.
Right.
I'm constantly going and participating in ceremony and actively showing up when it comes to my culture, and that's what it takes. So
Show your
you can't
hope.
be active in you can't be drinking alcohol and expecting, you can't be anchored with toxicity expecting for you to rise, because that's not the way it works. And it took me, you know, like took me a long time to figure that out.
I'm
And
just saying your
now,
hope, though. Your hope. That's what I appreciate.
yeah, just one of many that are out there. People have stories. They just haven't had the
Well, it's the
courage
power
to
of
come forward. So, you know, this is just inspiring people. The work's done. Now the inspiring's gotta happen. And it's just gotta happen. And you know, and so I bet you there's hundreds of other stories like this out there. There's just they don't have the right, you know, the connection with their homie to put it on the map, you know. That's it. And when you have that connection, then and the people who are able to stand with you and make sure they see your growth and they see what you're putting out is what you mean, and it's all honest and truthful, then this is what happens, you know. And it's just an example of yeah, it's just an example of like if I can crawl out of a cave and rebuild my life, you know what I mean? Imagine having have done this back in my 20s, you know. It's like saying I should have done this so long ago, but it wouldn't make me who I am right now, speaking to you and sharing this with you now.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And Amar, what a powerful film. And Tony Hawk, executive producer, can't get a better credit than that. So, and also one more thing, you know, I know so many skateboarders who had the same attitude you did, Joe. You didn't think you were good enough, but I tell them to go for it. And look at you, you've gone pro.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like I just wanted to just get it so I could have it. And I didn't realize like how impactful it was going to be, you know what I mean? And yeah, I do the same tricks. I just go a little faster and go a little longer.
You bring all that wisdom. You bring that
yeah.
wisdom with you. Thank you so much, gentlemen. What a great documentary. And Joe, I wish you the best of luck. And Amar, good luck on your next project. And let's talk again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you.